Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Alexander Ivanikov, and I'm the head of the Finance and Economics Department of PGC Gazprom. I'm happy to welcome you to a conference call to announce financial and operating results of PGC Gazprom under IFRS for the first quarter of 2020. At our conference call today, we have with us the Chief Accountant, Mr. Mikhail Roseyev, who's also Deputy Chairman of the Management Committee at PGC Gazprom, as well as representatives of key departments at PGC Gazprom, Gazprom Export, and Gazprom Neft. This presentation, slide deck for this conference call, is available at Gazprom's website. Before we begin, I would like to direct your attention to the fact that page 3 of the presentation contains important information regarding forward-looking statements, among other things, which may be made as part of this conference call. The reality of today is such that the pandemic of the new COVID-19 infection has an impact on all spheres of our life. And before we proceed to an overview of our financial performance at Gazprom Group for the first quarter of 2020, I would like to dwell upon the response to the outbreak of COVID-19 that we have undertaken to prevent the infection from spreading, to protect our employees, and ensure sustainable operations of our production facilities. In order to monitor the ongoing situation and coordinate response efforts against the virus, Gazprom set up a dedicated task force. We monitor daily information to analyze and timely respond to the changing environment. We maintain minimally required staff at the workstations to ensure sustainable and safe operations of our production facilities, while the remaining personnel has temporarily been transferred to remote operations. Gazprom's facilities run at reinforced security mode to allow people in and ensure continuous medical monitoring. We provide antiseptics and individual protection to all employees. Also, our employees are regularly tested for coronavirus. We disinfect the buildings and premises, transport, and special equipment. Shift operations take into account the threat of coronavirus or the COVID-19 spread. We rotate workers while locking them down in observer stations where they spent 14 days and run 2 tests for COVID-19. And in case we need to replace some personnel or personnel contacting with those who have tested positive for the infection, we have reserve personnel available, and most of the facilities have extended their shift term. Let me dwell upon the Chandinskoye field case in particular. Back in April, we had a lockdown introduced in Chyanba, given the COVID-19 threat and outburst. The field had dedicated measures to reinforce security with the help of clear zoning of the infrastructure and the construction facilities. These measures ensured there is no threat for the infection to penetrate the bubbles and ensure an uninterrupted cycle for the facilities that operate non-stop. The personnel ensuring sustainability of production operate in a closed bubble with all the facilities provided to them, as well as individual protection measures. Thus, the employees have the possibility not to leave the so-called clean zone and operate autonomously while minimizing their contacts. The Chandinskoye field has dedicated quarantine facility for employees of Gazprom as well as the subsidiaries. That quarantine facility has all the required equipment, including an ICU with ventilators and oxygen concentrators. The field also has a mobile MRI unit and a lab to test for COVID-19 using PCR. Given sufficient medical supplies, we can provide not only for preventive treatment, but also for actual treatment of lighter forms of the disease. The Chandinskoye field have extended their term of the shift as well, and also the employees are in self-isolation for 14 days before they're allowed in, and they're only allowed in once they have tested twice negatively for COVID-19. With the lockdown introduced, operations nonetheless never stopped. We ensured measures that provided for daily supply of gas into the Siberia pipeline from the Chandinskoye field in the amount of no less than 15 million cubic meters per day. On the 1st of June, the lockdown in Chandinskoye field was discontinued. I would also mark social responsibility manifested by Gazprom Group. Members of the management committee have submitted their salaries and private funds to fight the COVID-19, while the trade union employees have contributed into a fund that targets prevention of the infection spread. Companies of the group have acquired medical equipment and professional protective gear for medical facilities in their regions of operations. Thus, throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, the unified system of gas supply for Russia has been operating as planned. Off-takers in our export market have been receiving gas in full volume. Health and well-being of our employees, as well as suppliers, our subcontractors and partners remain a key priority for our long-term sustainable development. Now let's continue to the following page, number 5, to consider the company's performance in the first quarter this year. Clearly, the oil and gas industry in 2020 was confronted with unprecedented challenges. The situation in the European gas market was aggravated by further negative drivers, as well as excessive supply in the LNG market, abnormally hot ambient temperature for the second winter running, as well as high supply of inventories and underground storages. As a result, spot prices in European gas hubs went down to multi-year minimums, while in June they hit the historical minimum. On top of that, oil prices in the first quarter was also under significant pressure. In these conditions, Gazprom still demonstrated quite good financial performance, exceeding analysts' expectations for most analysts. Please, let's continue to the following page, number 6, to consider the financial performance of Gazprom Group in the first quarter 2020. As compared to the first quarter of 2019, we saw clearly the expected reduction in most of the financial metrics given the negative market environment in our key markets. Let's consider the European market. Average spot prices for gas as well as oil went down by about 50% as compared to the first quarter 2019. Gazprom Group's sales revenue in the first quarter 2020 went down by only 24% to 1.7 trillion rubles. While EBITDA went down by only 20%, exceeding 500 billion rubles. Profit attributable to shareholders was negative given the major slump in Russian ruble FX rate back in March, which resulted in significant FX losses as part of the financial losses or gains in the amount of 551 billion rubles. The reduced capex of Q1 2020, which was down 5% year-on-year, allowed us to generate, nonetheless, a positive free cash flow, even in the negative external environment. The amount of debt repaid in the first quarter exceeded the amount of new borrowings. However, the weaker ruble has resulted in both total and net debt going up, given that about 80% of the group's debt is in a foreign currency. In dollar terms, our adjusted net debt went up by only 3%. Please be reminded that responding to the declining demand in oil and gas markets that is linked to the COVID-19 pandemic, Gazprom Group has established measures to curtail its operating and capital expenditures, but in the first quarter they have not yet manifested an impact on the financial performance. Let's continue to page 7. The key driver behind reduced revenue of the gas business in the first quarter 2020 was a lower average realized price in Europe, while the volumes in absolute terms went down as well. In the first quarter, our average realized price in Europe went down by 37% year-on-year. As I have already explained earlier, spot prices in the same period of Q1 on European gas hubs went down by a much higher degree. That gap comes with better Gazprom's performance vis-à-vis the gas hub prices, as explained, or comes thanks to the structure of our portfolio of long-term contracts. Speaking of the spot prices in the European gas hubs, we have reasons to believe that the market has bottomed down already, and with a more balanced market, which could come in Q4, driven by the seasonality factor as well as high volume of inventories and underground gas storages. On top of that, the volumes of gas realized in Europe went down in Q1 because of the rather warm weather as well as the COVID-19 response measures in European countries. Please mark that in Q1 we sold about 1 billion cubic meters to China by the Siberia pipeline. This comes as part of Europe and other countries segment in our financial statement. In the former Soviet Union market, we also saw the negative dynamics with the sales down by 26%. The Russian gas market was much more stable, with the average realized price growing by 1%, while with a slight reduction in volumes. Thus, the sales from gas revenue in Q1 2020 went down by only 7% year on year, and that's again explained by rather warm weather. Let's continue to page 8 now. The share of oil and utilities business in Gazprom Group's revenue structure has somewhat increased, given a more moderate reduction in revenue for those segments as compared to the gas business. As at the first quarter 2020, sales of oil, gas condensate, and refined products in ruble terms went down by 15% year on year, while the refining segment has seen a reduction in their profitability as well. On top of that, the oil business EBITDA has seen a negative impact given the time lag for export duty calculation. Nonetheless, the revenue business kept generating a significant free cash flow, while electric power and heat sales in Q1 2020 went down by 9% given low volumes, again due to the rather warm weather conditions. The utilities business of Gazprom is still generating a positive free cash flow. Let's continue to the following page, number 9. As usual, I would like to direct your attention to the adjustments and the need for adjustments of certain financial indicators by the amount of bank deposits. This is financial indicators by the amount of bank deposits. This is done for proper analytical accounting. Page 9 explains exactly that, with the amount of bank deposits represented as part of other current and non-current assets on Gazprom Group's balance sheet as at the end of Q1 2020. The number went down as compared to 2019 end of first quarter by 154 billion rubles to 523 billion rubles. The reduced amount of deposits has resulted in higher cash flow from operations, which is reflected in the net change of working capital line. Over to page 10. Here you can see the adjustments of operating and free cash flows by the amount of short-term bank deposits. In the first quarter 2020, we saw a reduced volume of deposits as represented in press accounts as a change in working capital. The analytical adjustment cancels the impact of this driver on the operating free cash flow. The net change in working capital is mostly related to high receivables and lower payables. Thus, even in the negative external environment, the free cash flow of the group was positive as at the end of Q1 2020, standing at 19 billion rubles. Page 11 explains the capital expenditures of Gazprom Group. In the first quarter 2020, the capex number went down to 419 billion rubles, which is 5% less than in the first quarter of 2019. The reduction is mostly explained by the launch of Turk Stream gas pipeline, as well as completion of the major works related to Nord Stream 2 pipeline as well. Significant increase, notable increase in capex in the oil business is related to more drilling at new fields of Gazprom Neft. As I mentioned, capex optimization would have a large impact in the following quarters. Now page 12, where we have key debt metrics. In the first quarter, we can see very different dynamics in ruble terms and dollar terms, which is explained by much weaker Russian ruble as at the end of the quarter. Given the fact that most of our debt and revenue as well represented in foreign currency, it is correct in our view to analyze our debt burden in dollar terms. As at the end of Q1 2020, the total debt went down by 7% to $58 billion, while the reduced volume of cash and cash equivalents as well as bank deposits in our balance sheets that have come down somewhat. This is related in slight increase of the net debt. As you can see in the chart, the adjustments by the amount of bank deposit result in net debt at the end of Q1 2020 standing at $41.4 billion, which is only 3% higher than the 31st of December 2019. It's important to mark that the weakening market environment nonetheless allowed Gazprom to ensure minimal growth of its debt burden, and the increase of the leverage is explained first and foremost by the expected reduction of the company's EBITDA. The net debt to EBITDA is up as at the end of the quarter by from 1.4 to 1.5, which is in the middle of the range which we consider comfortable. In order to yet another proof of our creditworthiness is the maintained credit ratings coming from all leading agencies which have maintained their outlook as well as the ratings. Given the uncertainty of the market and high volatility of the financial markets, we have still managed to have 3 successful issues of Eurobonds and 2 successful placements of Russian ruble bonds in the amount of more than $4.5 billion for 5 and 10 years at minimal rates. We've also started using project financing for our gas processing plant and contributed 3.1 billion euro out of 11.4 in Q1 in order to refinance the bridge credits received earlier. Over to the next page. As we have mentioned on numerous occasions, dividends to shareholders remain one of the key priorities for the company, and a clear proof of that commitment is the dividend which the company's shareholders approved at the general meeting for the year of 2019 in the amount of 361 billion rubles. This amount is not only close to the record high amount of the previous year, but also exceeds the minimal number as calculated per our new dividend policy. The financial performance in Q1 2020 reconfirm the correctness of the calculation mechanism which we have opted to have that enables adjustments of net income by the non-cash items, which results in the dividend calculation with a formal or paper loss for the full quarter. The calculated dividend base nonetheless stands at 288 billion rubles for the first quarter. With the new dividend policy in place, we have committed to pay no less than 40% of adjusted net income for the full year of 2020. So the contribution of the first quarter represents about 5 rubles per share. Over to page 14. To conclude my presentation, I'd like to mark that Gazprom has managed to adapt swiftly to the fast-changing environment of this year and ensured safety of its employees and reliable operations of its facilities in the new circumstances of the pandemics. And we have managed to come up with a cost reduction program, thus maintaining financial resilience in the crisis. The investment highlights of Gazprom Group in the current environment ensured by our plan to cut costs so that we could maintain low production cash cost and maintain leadership on the European gas market, while also diversifying our sales volumes to China. Secondly, our conservative financial policy to manage liquidity and debt ensures flexibility of the cash flows and financial resilience. The comfortable leverage and sufficient liquidity as at the end of Q1 represent a good foundation to overcome the acute period of the market turbulence. In the longer term, our free cash flow will be maintained by the commissioning of the key projects, as well as the hopefully recovery of the global economy. which would reflect positively on us. In response to the current situation, we're undertaking comprehensive measures to mitigate the negative impact of external drivers on our financial metrics. We also keep optimizing the operating and capital expenditures, as well as looking for new growth points for our free cash flow as well. Dividends to shareholders are a key priority of our financial policy because we consider that instrument as one of the main highlights for the shareholder value of Gazprom. In the situation of the pandemic, ESG is becoming more prominent, and that is true for our company as well. Thank you for your attention at this point. We're ready to take your questions and proceed with the Q&A.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star followed by 1 on your telephone keypad now. If you change your mind, please press star followed by 2. If you are online, please press the flag icon on the left-hand side of your screen. And when preparing to ask your question, please ensure your phone is unmuted locally. So our first question today comes from Igor Kuzmin from Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead.
Спасибо. Я задам вопрос по-русски. Даже, наверное, пару вопросов. Могли бы вы актуализировать свои ожидания по 2020 году по капексу, а также по ценам, средним ценам реализации газа в Европе, а также по объемам экспортным в Европу, не включая СНГ. Спасибо.
Hello, Igor Kuzmin from Morgan Stanley speaking. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm going to ask a couple of questions in Russian. First of all, could you update us with your expectations for the full year of 2020 as regards your capex, and as well as the average realized price for your exports to Europe, and also for the volumes that you're going to export to Europe, and excluding the former Soviet Union countries and CIS. Thank you.
Спасибо за вопрос. Поскольку он состоял из нескольких частей, то мы будем отвечать хором. Сначала я отвечу на вопрос про размер капекса в 2020 году. По нашим прогнозам он должен составить после оптимизации цифру 1 триллион 300 миллиардов рублей. По группе.
Well, thank you for your question. Mr. Vanikov speaking. Given that it is comprised of several sub-questions, let us respond in chorus. I'll start with the first sub-question on the full year 2020 capex. Following the optimization exercise, it's going to amount at 1.3 trillion rubles for Gazprom Group. That's group capex.
На вопрос по прогнозу цен в Европе я попрошу ответить Зотова Андрея Владимировича, это начальника департамента Газпром экспорта.
As regards your second sub-question on the average realized price outlook to Europe, I'm going to ask Mr. Andrei Zotov, head of department at Gazprom Export, to respond.
Добрый вечер, уважаемые коллеги. Спасибо за ожидаемый вопрос. Значит, с учетом той оперативной информации, которая у нас есть по итогам 2 кварталов и по оценке возможностей наших поставок по контрактам и дополнительным продажам через ЗТП в 3 и 4 кварталах, сейчас мы делаем вывод, что необходимости корректировать цифры, которые были озвучены по результатам 1 квартала, нет необходимости, учитывая большой потенциал 4 квартала, как мы ожидаем, как с точки зрения цен, которые там сейчас складываются, так и с точки зрения ожидаемых отборов по нашим контрактам. Просто хочу заметить, что спред сегодняшний между летом и зимой достигает $90 на отдельных торговых площадках. Поэтому ожидать корректировки, вернее, делать сейчас корректировку в сторону снижения наших ожиданий, мы не видим необходимости.
Well, good evening, colleagues, and thank you for the quite expected question. Given our operating updates for the first 2 quarters and our sales outlook, given our long-term portfolio of contracts as well as the electronic trading platform that we have for Q3 and Q4, there is no need, as we see currently, to update our guidance as announced and disclosed earlier. Given that Q4 is going to be stronger, given that the prices outlook on the hubs that we see currently, as well as our off-take targets and the contract portfolio, we don't see any need for adjustment. Just for your understanding, the summer to winter spreads and certain gas trading platform could reach $90 at present. So given that, we do not see any need to adjust our guidance downward.
Следующий вопрос, пожалуйста. Мне коллеги подсказывают, что не было ответа про объемы. Ну тогда, Андрей Владимирович, будьте добры, добавьте про объем.
Да, мне показалось, что в ответе прозвучало, что потенциал, так сказать, отборов по нашим контрактам, он говорит о отсутствии необходимости корректировать ожидаемый объем. Был озвучен 166-167 миллиардов. Вот такой отбор мы ожидаем.
As far as the volumes are concerned, I think that was part of my answer as well. We do not see any need to adjust our guidance downward, given the outlook for off-take volumes and our long-term contract portfolio. Previously, we provided the guidance of 166 to 167 BCM, and that currently stands.
Пожалуйста, следующий вопрос.
Next question, please.
The next question on the line is from Karen Kosatanya from Bank of America. Please go ahead.
Спасибо большое. Я тоже задам свои вопросы на русском. Александр Сергеевич, спасибо большое за презентацию. У меня два вопроса. Первый вопрос про оптимизацию затрат. Вы, по-моему, упоминали 200 миллиардов рублей. Остается ли это целью и какой у вас прогресс по поводу по этой оптимизации? И мой второй вопрос по турецкому рынку, который некогда был большим рынком для поставок Газпрома. Сейчас, судя по прессе, там большие проблемы и с отборами, и с выплатами. Как вы собираетесь их решать? Спасибо.
Next question comes from, hello, that's Karen Kosatanya from Bank of America speaking. I'm going to ask my question in Russian as well. Mr. Manikov, thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. My first question is about your cost optimization targets. Previously, you announced 200 billion rubles, whether that remains the target still, and how are you progressing down that road? And my other question is related to the Turkish market. That used to be a very big one for Gazprom. However, given the current reports, we're observing certain issues with volumes as well as payments from that market. So how are you trying to resolve those? Thank you.
Карен, спасибо за вопросы. Я тогда начну с вопроса по поводу оптимизации финансовой. Опять же, Андрея Владимировича Зотова попросил подготовиться к ответу на второй вопрос по турецкому рынку.
Thank you for your questions, Karen. I'm by responding to your question about the cost optimizations, and I'm asking Mr. Andrei Zotov to be prepped with the second question on the Turkish market.
Значит, как уже ранее заявлялось, да, в принципе, мы приняли решение о сокращении, об оптимизации как операционного бизнеса, так и капитального строительства.
As announced earlier, we have decided insanely to reduce or optimize both the operating as well as capital expenditures.
На сегодняшний момент целевыми цифрами сокращения являются в операционном бизнесе. Сейчас я говорю только про газовый бизнес. Это 140 миллиардов рублей сокращение затрат в операционной части и примерно 200-220 миллиардов в капексе, опять-таки по газовому бизнесу.
Our current targets are as follows. Let me speak for the gas part of the business only. Operating side, 140 billion, and that's again gas business alone. On the capex side, 200 to 220 billion, again gas business only.
Таким образом, совокупная цифра сокращения затрат, она несколько выше той, которую вы назвали, и скорее находится в районе 360 миллиардов рублей. И хотел бы подчеркнуть, что к этой цифре еще добавятся сокращения, которые произойдут симметрично и в энергетическом, и в нефтяном бизнесе в процентном соотношении равным сокращением газовым. Да? То есть на 20% будут сокращены и операционные, и капитальные затраты. Это будет к этой цифре плюсом, если мы говорим по группе.
Thus, the total amount of cost savings on the gas business side is somewhat higher than the 200 billion you mentioned in your question, and the number is actually closer to 360 billion rubles. On top of that would come further savings in our utilities and oil business, and pretty much equal share. So that's about that's a reduction of both operating as well as capital expenditures by about 20% in each, in the utilities and the oil business, and that would come on top of the 360 billion of the gas business.
При этом мы исходим из того, что сокращение затрат не должно отразиться на выполнении производственных планов и никоим образом на надежности поставок газа нашим потребителям как в России, так и за рубежом.
We also assume that the cost reduction would not impact the production plans as well as reliability of gas supply to our off-takers in Russia or internationally.
Сокращенный бюджет будет внесен на обсуждение правления общества в сентябре текущего года.
In September this year, the management committee is set to consider the updated budget.
Но хотел бы подчеркнуть, что принципиальное решение о таком шаге было принято еще в апреле, и в общем общество уже живет, исходя из философии сокращения затрат, поэтому скорее сентябрь это уже формализация процесса, который к тому моменту будет идти на протяжении почти 5 месяцев.
The decision in principle has been made earlier, back in April this year, so we are living in that mindset ever since April. In September, we are going to formalize the new approach, which will have been running for 5 months by then.
Теперь хотел бы передать слово Андрею Владимировичу Зотову.
Over to Mr. Zotov now for the second question, please.
Да, коллеги, действительно ситуация в Турции, она в первом квартале, если еще в первом квартале она не сильно показала снижение отборов по нашим контрактам, 15%, вот, против 15%, вот, против цифры, которая была в 2019 году, то во втором квартале там как бы совокупность факторов сошлась. Это и усиление влияния пандемии, и усиление конкуренции с точки зрения поставок газа сжиженного природного по ценам значительно ниже наших контрактных цен. И поэтому отборы упали, тем более предложение было большое. Потому что азиатские рынки начали сокращаться по тем же самым причинам. Значит, ряд стран вообще объявляли форс-мажор по приему судов СПГ. Вот. Поэтому, конечно, весь этот избыточный сжиженный природный газ, он пошел на европейский, в том числе и турецкий рынок. Но с началом третьего квартала ситуация начала выравниваться, и довольно неплохие отборы по нашим контрактам показывают июль месяц. Вот, и мы надеемся, что до конца года все-таки мы выйдем на цифры прошлогодние по поставкам газа в Турцию.
Oh, yes, indeed. In the first quarter, the market in Turkey was not much affected. The volumes were down by only 15%, so it's 15% year-on-year reduction in volumes in the first quarter. However, we saw a combination of factors in the second quarter, resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic as well as the influx of LNG at significantly lower prices as compared to our long-term contract portfolio. So the supply side was up on the LNG part because the Asian market shut down in the second quarter, and some countries even declared an act of God or a force majeure, refusing to receive tankers of LNG, which ended up in Europe, including Turkey. In the third quarter, however, the situation seems to have balanced out. We see some good offtake volumes in July, and by the end of the year, we expect to hit the same numbers flat as was the case in 2019.
Спасибо большое.
Спасибо, Карен. Следующий вопрос, пожалуйста.
Thank you. Next question, please.
The next question is from Alexander Bogansky from Renaissance Capital. Please go ahead.
Здравствуйте. Спасибо большое за презентацию. У меня два вопроса. Во-первых, вы не могли бы прокомментировать ваши ожидания по росту регулируемого тарифа в России в этом году? Предполагалось изначально повышение с 1 июля. Оно не произошло. Могли бы озвучить ваши ожидания по тому, когда и на какой объем вырастут тарифы? И второй вопрос довольно небольшой. Мы почти никогда не говорим про вашу выручку от услуг по транспортировке газа. Но я заметил, что в первом квартале эта выручка выросла год на год, в то время как не было ни роста тарифов, и объемы, я так предполагаю, транспортировки тоже третьих лиц тоже, наверное, сократились. Вы не могли бы, пожалуйста, рассказать, что привело к росту выручки по этой линии? Спасибо.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. My first question regards your expectations of the Russian domestic tariff adjustment. It was supposed to happen as of the 1st of July, but never happened. So when would you expect this to come into place, and by how much, by what amount would you expect the tariff to be adjusted? My other question seems less prominent one, but still important. The gas transportation revenue that Gazprom is receiving in Q1, that revenue went up year on year, while the volumes went down clearly. Could you comment, please, why the gas transportation revenue could have gone up?
На первый вопрос я попрошу ответить Андреева Алексея Владимировича, начальника управления 817-го департамента. А на второй вопрос подготовится Чепкасова Анатолия Энергиевича, начальника управления департамента по транспортировке газа. Спасибо.
Да, коллеги, Андреев. По вопросу о тарифах на транспортировку газа. На текущий момент при работе с регулирующими органами отработан вопрос индексации цен на газ. Это решение принято, в настоящий момент находится в стадии оформления. В части тарифов на транспортировку решения от регулирующего органа на текущий момент пока нет. Работа проводится, в установленные сроки сданы все заявки, представлены все материалы в регулирующие органы, представлены все необходимые пояснения, которые возникли в ходе рассмотрения данной заявки. По перспективам принятия решения на текущий момент пока комментариев нет, так как пока процесс рассмотрения заявки со стороны регулирующего органа не завершен.
Well, as far as the first question is concerned, Mr. Alexey Andreev, Head of Division at Department 817, is taking that question. We have worked on that question with the regulatory authorities, and a decision in favor has been made. We are now currently documenting that as appropriate. That's for the gas sales tariff domestically. As far as the gas transportation tariff domestically is concerned, no decision has been made as yet. Work is still ongoing with the regulator. We have submitted all all the materials timely, provided all the clarifications as requested by the regulatory body, and we are expecting their decision. I don't think I can comment as to the timeline of that decision, given no decision has been made as yet. And the second question will be addressed by Mr. Anatoly Chepkasov. Please go ahead.
Прошу прощения, я бы хотел сначала дать слово Михаилу Николаевичу Рассееву, он озвучит цифры выручки по транспорту газа, а потом, если есть что добавить, Анатолий Геннадьевич добавит.
Hold on, first, the Chief Accountant, Mr. Mikhail Rasseyev, is going to provide the revenue, gas transportation revenue numbers, and then Mr. Chepkasov could comment.
Коллеги, что касается выручки от продаж услуг по транспортировке газа, то в отчетном периоде она увеличилась всего на 1%, причем основную ее долю занимает выручка от продажи на территории Российской Федерации, она изменилась совсем незначительно, даже там меньше, чем на 1%. А некоторый прирост у нас был в части порядка 36% по продаже услуг по транспортировке в Европе и других странах, но это в основном связано с операциями по перепродаже услуг, которые осуществляются там в связи с деятельностью, осуществляемой на торговых площадках Европы, да, то есть это не регулируемая деятельность, и несмотря на то, что там не было ничего экстраординарного, это скорее такие небольшие колебания в рамках нашей деятельности.
Well, frankly speaking, the gas transportation services revenue only went up by 1% in the first quarter. If you consider the bulk of that volume, which is gas transportation services within Russia, it is even less than 1%. There is a growth of about 26% in Europe and other countries, but that is accounted for trading operations where we simply resell the services when involved in trading operations on the gas hubs. This is non-regulated activity, and there is nothing special actually. Regular fluctuations as part of our normal operations.
Спасибо, Михаил Николаевич. Я думаю, исчерпывающий ответ, там вряд ли есть смысл что-то добавлять. Следующий вопрос, пожалуйста.
Thank you. I believe this had been an exhaustive answer, and there is no follow-up on that. I think we can take the next question, please.
The next question is from Angelina Glazova from JP Morgan. Please go ahead.
Да, добрый день. Большое спасибо за возможность задать вопрос и за краткосрочные комментарии. У меня вот два вопроса, но они касаются более долгосрочных тем. Не могли бы вы прокомментировать, сказать нам ваше мнение по стратегии Евросоюза на тему
Operator, I think we have lost the question.
Angelina, is your line open?
European issue is gone.
Коллеги, ну, видимо, какая-то техническая небольшая, мы не слышим вопроса. Если Ангелина вернется, мы постараемся ответить, но поскольку вопрос не прозвучал, да, поняли только что про Евросоюз. Давайте возьмем следующий вопрос, а к этому вернемся, когда восстановится связь.
Colleagues, I believe we have lost Angelina's question. We only understand generally it's about the EU, and if Angelina is back on the line, we'll be happy to take her question. But as we are waiting for her, let's take the next question first.
Of course. The next question is from Andrei Gromodin. Please go ahead.
Добрый день, большое спасибо за презентацию, поздравления с хорошими результатами. У меня совсем два небольших вопроса. Вот первый по проекту в услуги. компания уже объявила о том, что заключила договора по поставке и газа, и этана, и заключила EPC-контракт на строительство комплекса газопереработки. Вы не могли бы уточнить, когда все-таки ожидается финальное инвестиционное решение по данному проекту, потому что, по-моему, его еще не объявляли, и сколько может стоить этот новый ГПЗ-СПГ проект? И второй вопрос, такой больше общего характера. Недавно был тендер по трубам, достаточно большой, «Газпрома», 1,3 миллиона тонн. И там как бы такой новый подход был в как бы организации. Вы не могли бы сказать, в чем как бы плюсы для компании и как бы почему именно компания выводит на тендер сразу все, большую часть объемов там, наверное, этого и следующего года? В чем преимущество? Спасибо большое.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the presentation. Congratulations on your great results. I have two main questions, if I may. My first question relates to the OGZPY project. You have announced that contracts have been made for gas supplies as well as ethane, and also you have entered into an EPC contract for the gas process complex. I'm wondering when the final investment decision is pending for OGZPY. As far as I understand, this hasn't been announced as yet. And also, what would be the eventual investment or the cost of this major gas processing plus LNG facility? My other question is more of a general kind. Recently, Gazprom ran a pipes tender for 1.3 million tons with a new approach by contracting pretty much full volume for this year and major bulk of next year. I'm wondering what are the benefits of this approach. Could you please comment?
Спасибо за вопрос, Андрей. Я на первый вопрос попрошу ответить Славича, замначальника управления департамента маркетинга. И на второй вопрос Чиракаева Кирилла Эдуардовича, замначальника департамента закупок.
Thank you for your questions, Andrei. I'm asking Mr. Denis Novikov, Deputy Head of Department, to respond to your first question, Mr. Kirill Chirakayev, Deputy Head of the Procurement Department, to respond to the second question.
Добрый день, коллеги. Напомню, что окончательное инвестиционное решение по реализации проекта «Услуги» было принято в прошлом году, 29 марта. Значит, переводите, да, или мне сразу много слов сказать?
Good afternoon, colleagues. Please be reminded that the final investment decision for the OGZPY project was made last year, and that happened on the 29th March.
Значит, в настоящее время приняты основные технические решения по проекту, завершены инженерные изыскания, и в данный момент ведется разработка проектной документации.
Key technical decisions for the project have been made already, as well as the engineering surveying phase completed. We're currently working on the project documentation drafting.
Да, в начале июня Русхим Альянс подписал EPC-договор с Нефтегазом на строительство объектов ГПЗ и ОЗХ, в рамках которого на первом этапе будет выполнена разработка рабочей документации, после которой будет определена твердая цена EPC-контракта. И эта твердая цена будет зафиксирована соответствующим приложением к EPC-контракту. Срок определения этой твердой цены 30.06.2021 года.
In early June, Ruskhim Alliance entered into an EPC contract with Neftegas for the LNG gas processing complex facility. We have as phase one the development of working documentation for the project, at which point a firm price is set to be established and fixed in an annex to the EPC contract. The timing for the EPC price to be fixed is the 30th of June 2021.
Ну и, соответственно, в рамках второго этапа будет выполнено в полном объеме там, проектирование, строительство и ввод в эксплуатацию ГПЗ и ОЗХ.
As phase two, we envisage the design as well as construction and commissioning for the processing facilities.
Кроме того, да, еще заключены у Нипигаза заключены договоры с компаниями, ну, с лицензиарами СПГ на разработку двух базовых проектов по различным технологиям.
On top of that, Nipigaz has entered into contracts with license holders to design two basic projects following two different technologies.
В соответствии с заключенными договорами, да, в первом квартале 2021 года будет завершена разработка базовых проектов по СПГ части, а во втором квартале 2021 на основании этих базовых проектов будут получены твердые EPC-предложения на блоке СПГ.
So, as far as the LNG part of the complex is concerned, in Q1 2021, we're going to get basic designs completed for the two options on hand, and in the second quarter 2021, based on the basic projects available, we'll be getting firm EPC propositions.
Добрый день. По второму вопросу, по закупке труб большого диаметра. Значит, здесь в закупке в этом тендере была объединена потребность группы «Газпром» на 2021-2022 год в трубах большого диаметра для строительства, для продолжения строительства инвестпроектов. И вот это объединение позволило на 2 года вперед зафиксировать цену на трубы большого диаметра. И кроме того, при выборе победителей в этой закупке учесть не только ценовые критерии, но и загрузку самих заводов-изготовителей труб большого диаметра.
Well, as far as the second question is concerned, on the procurement of large diameter pipes, indeed the procurement exercise we ran as a tender for Gazprom Group comprises 2021 and 2022 demand within the group for the construction of its investment projects. This joint procurement has allowed to fix the prices for 2 years ahead, as well as take into account not only the pricing element, but also the utilization of capacities at pipe manufacturers' plants.
По результатам этого тендера мы впервые использовали такую конструкцию, как выбор не одного победителя, а 5 победителей, каждому из которых распределен объем в зависимости от его места, которое он занял, от 10 до 35%. И все эти 5 победителей – это 5 крупнейших российских заводов. В этом тендере не участвовали посредники. Такой подход, вот выбор нескольких победителей по крупной закупке, он рекомендован был Федеральной антимонопольной службой. Она нам неоднократно говорила использовать такую конструкцию. Мы вот с этим согласились. Ну и по итогу я хочу добавить, что в результате тендера достигнута экономия порядка 3% от начальной цены, что достаточно неплохо, учитывая вот такую высокую цену, начальную максимальную цену всего этого лота.
Well, as far as the outcome of this procedure is concerned, for the first time ever, Gazprom has opted to select 5 rather than 1 winners, and each received a dedicated volume depending on the ranking in the winners list, obtaining from 20 to 35% of the total procurement. These are 5 largest pipe manufacturers in Russia. No intermediaries took part in the tender. As far as this approach is concerned, it has been recommended to us by the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service to use this approach with several winners on numerous occasions, and we have finally agreed and proceeded, thus resulting in a saving of 3% of the initial price, which is rather significant given the overarching scope of the tender. This concludes my answer. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Next question, please.
Angelina Glazova has returned with her question. Please go ahead, Angelina.
Коллеги, добрый день. Меня сейчас слышно?
Да, слышно.
Отлично, спасибо. Задать вопрос еще раз. Я не знаю, в какой момент у меня потерялась связь, поэтому задам первый вопрос сначала. Хотелось бы понять ваше мнение по поводу недавно опубликованной стратегии Евросоюза на тему водорода. Как вы видите развитие этой темы после 2030 года? Дело в том, что стратегия сейчас более смещена в сторону зеленого водорода и в меньшей степени, скажем так, оставляет пространство для маневра газовым производителям. Вот ведете ли вы сейчас какие-то исследования, разработки на эту тему и, может быть, можете дать какие-то комментарии насчет того, как вы видите рынок в Европе после 2030 года на более долгосрочную перспективу. И второй также вопрос по долгосрочной тематике касается китайского рынка. Вот недавно генеральным директором «Газпрома» была озвучена цифра 130 миллиардов кубометров как потенциальная цель в обозримом будущем, скажем так, экспорта газа в Китай. Вот не могли бы вы подсказать, насколько эта перспектива все-таки долгосрочна, после 2030 года она будет, скорее всего, заметна, или как-то нет точных дат для, скажем так, исполнения этого долгосрочного газа. И вот какие, возможно, маршруты вы сейчас рассматриваете дополнительно для Сибири-2? Спасибо.
Well, thank you for your comments on the short-term issues. Let me ask a few longer-term related comments. My first question is about the newly announced European Union strategy on hydrogen in 2030 and beyond. It currently focuses on the so-called green hydrogen, leaving much less space for gas producers. I'm wondering if Gazprom is undertaking any research in this area. Could you please comment on your vision of the European market beyond the year of 2030? My other long-term question relates to China. Recently, Gazprom CEO announced the target of 130 billion cubic meters as potential supply to that country in the nearest future, in certain future. I'm wondering whether that future comes after 2030, or is the timeline still unclear when you're going to hit the 130 BCM? Also, I'm wondering which potential routes you're currently discussing on the Power of Siberia 2 projects. Thank you.
Коллеги, перед тем, как я передам слово своим коллегам, хотел бы все-таки напомнить, что все-таки основная тема нашей сегодняшней конференции – это отчетность за первый квартал. И в этом отношении стратегические планы на 10 и более лет – это важная часть, но мне кажется, у нас есть достаточно большое количество площадок, где мы имеем возможность обсудить такие вопросы более предметно и немножко в другом формате. Поэтому я сейчас попрошу коллег ответить, но прошу все-таки задающих вопросы задавать их ближе к теме сегодняшней конференции. Ну и хочу напомнить, что, собственно, кроме этих двух вопросов, у нас осталось время еще для одного вопроса. Сейчас попрошу Романова Константина Владимировича, начальника отдела департамента перспективного развития. Первый вопрос. Кирилла Юрьевича Полоус, начальника управления департамента перспективного развития. На второй. Начальника управления департамента перспективного развития. На второй.
Well, colleagues, before I hand over this question to someone on my team to respond, I would like to remind you that the focus of this conference call is Q1 2020 financial statement and discussing strategic plans for 10 years and beyond. represents an important part of that, but nonetheless we have some other platforms for more detailed and in-depth discussions in a different format. So I'd ask those asking questions to be closer to the subject of our today's discussion. So please be reminded as well that on top of the 2 questions just announced, we'll have time for 1 further question. In the meantime, I'll ask Mr. Konstantin Romanov, Head of Division at the Prospective Development Department, to handle the first question, and Mr. Kirill Pavlovich, Mr. Konstantin Romanov, Head of Section, and Mr. Kirill Pavlovich is Head of Division within the Department of Prospective Development. Kirill will be handling the second question. Thanks.
Добрый вечер, коллеги. «Газпром» принимал участие в общественных дискуссиях, которые были организованы Европейской комиссией по проекту водородной стратегии, и считаем удачно, так как те предложения, которые мы высказывали, а именно применение пиролиза метана для производства низкоуглеродного водорода, также включены в уже опубликованную стратегию ЕС.
Well, good evening, colleagues. Gazprom did take part in the public discussion initiated by the European Commission on the hydrogen strategy, and that participation was quite successful, as our proposition to resort to pyrolysis to produce low-carbon hydrogen has made its way into the hydrogen strategy.
И водород, произведенный из природного газа, обладает как экономическими, так и экологическими преимуществами. То есть он может быть произведен без выбросов СО2. При этом хотел бы также привести такое сравнение, что сейчас в Европе производится более 8 миллионов тонн водорода, и на это используется более 30 миллиардов кубометров газа.
Hydrogen produced from natural gas has certain economic as well as environmental benefits, since it can be made with no CO2 emissions. I can handle the following analogy. Currently, Europe manufactures more than 2 million tons of hydrogen produced from more than 30 billion cubic meters of gas.
Тогда как по планам ЕС через 5 лет предполагается всего лишь 1 миллион тонн производить водорода с использованием электролиза воды.
And in 5 years' time, the EU plans to make only 1 million tons of hydrogen using electrolysis of H2O.
Соответственно, мы ведем с европейскими партнерами дискуссии и переговоры о реализации пилотных проектов таких водородных в Европе. В том числе стратегия позволяет использовать и грантовую систему, механизмы грантов Еврокомиссии для развития пиролиза.
We are currently talking to our partners and are involved in discussions on running potential pilot projects in the hydrogen field. We could potentially use European Commission's grants to resort to pyrolysis that would help produce hydrogen.
Поэтому мы считаем, что природный газ по-прежнему останется таким важным источником для водорода и в целом для ЕС.
Thus, we believe that natural gas is set to remain an important source in hydrogen for the European Union looking forward.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Что касается Китая, обозначенный совокупный долгосрочный потенциал по экспорту газа в КНР 130 миллиардов кубометров в год включает как действующий газопровод «Сила Сибири», так и ряд обсуждаемых с китайскими партнерами перспективных проектов, включая наращивание поставок по «Силе Сибири» на 6 миллиардов до 44 миллиардов кубометров в год, поставки с Дальнего Востока, строительство «Силы Сибири-2» через Монголию и западный маршрут.
Well, as far as China is concerned, the target of 130 billion cubic meters per year, which is the long-term exports outlook and total, is comprised of both the current power of Siberia capacities which could be ramped up by 6 billion cubic meters to the total of 44 BCM, as well as a number of other projects we are discussing with Chinese partners, including supply of gas from the Russian Far East, as well as the Power of Siberia 2 project via Mongolia, as well as the so-called Western Route.
Говорить о конкретных сроках в настоящее время вышеперечисленных проектов не приходится, так как ряд из них находится на прединвестиционной стадии, и переговоры ведутся с китайскими партнерами.
Well, there is no timeline to be discussed currently for the projects in question, given some of those are in pre-investment phase and negotiations with the Chinese partners continue.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Коллеги, спасибо. Мы работаем уже больше часа. Мы готовы взять заключительный вопрос. Пожалуйста.
Colleagues, thank you. We have been online for more than an hour now, and we're ready to take one final question at this point.
Thank you. The next question is from Igor Kuzmin from Morgan Stanley. Please go ahead, Igor.
Спасибо большое. У меня дополнительный вопрос по дивидендам, по ожиданиям дивидендов за 2020 год. Будет ли снижена дивидендная база с учетом компенсации в $1,5 миллиарда, которая была выплачена в пользу польской компании PG&E? Спасибо.
Well, thank you. I have a quick follow-up question on the dividend expectations for the full year of 2020. I'm wondering if the dividend base for the full year of 2020 is going to be reduced by the amount of compensation to PG&E in the amount of $1.5 billion.
Спасибо за вопрос. Он как раз хорош для завершающего. Короткий ответ нет, потому что эта сумма не влияет на чистую прибыль по итогам 2020 года. И таким образом она не отразится на расчете дивидендов по итогам 2020 года.
Well, thank you for your question. That's a great one to conclude our conference call today. The answer to your question is no, given that the compensation amount is not going to affect our net income for the full year of 2020, and hence it's not going to affect the dividend calculation. Thanks.
Коллеги, большое спасибо за совместную работу. Мы, как всегда, благодарим нашего переводчика Константина Голоту за образцовый перевод. И ждем вас всех с нетерпением на следующем конференц-звонке по результатам первого полугодия. Всего хорошего.
Colleagues, thank you for our joint effort today, and as always, we appreciate the efforts of our translator, Mr. Konstantin Golota, and we're looking forward to welcoming you all to our next conference call based on the first half of year results. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude today's call. You may now disconnect your lines and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.